Hello and welcome to Streatham. This is the show where we explore street view coverage of a noteworthy location, looking out for beautiful architecture and stunning scenery, while I amuse myself by remarking on what we see. This is the fifth part of a series I'm doing called Red Brick London, in which we explore the late 19th and early 20th century architecture of the British capital, looking out for bricks with a high iron oxide content. And for the first time in the series today, we are going to be visiting South London. Yes, we're going south of the Thames. We are going to the postcode of SW16, and we are going to be looking at Streatham. We start here on the western edge of Streatham Common, which is just behind us. And we begin by taking a look at this very handsome row of facades here. I wonder if we can find some coverage when it was a bit of a sunnier day. Something like this, perhaps. Still not quite as sunny as it might have been. But I think the thing that's particularly appealing about the gables here are these little curly side pieces. Now, if you ask me though, there could be something a little bit more extravagant, maybe triangular on top, that would just lift these into the next layer of aesthetic distinction. We do actually have something like that here, but it's a shame that it's only on a few of them. It's almost as though some of them were knocked off, and then a funny little triangle there. In any case, we shall proceed. You might be noticing some red brick buildings to our right, but we're going to be disregarding those because they are quite a bit newer than the architecture we're interested in. They were probably built in the 1960s. But we are going to take a look at this red brick church here. And there it is, some wintry coverage. I like the details on the side of the tower. Perhaps I'll find out what that sort of feature is called and flash the word for it up on the screen. We carry on past the station, which is just to our left. And we now come to our next point of interest, which is this row just here. And as we move across the street, we jump into some rather interesting coverage from, I think, March earlier this year. We've got a very unusual light quality. It's as though it's been raining or just about to rain, but the sun is coming through. This is rainbow weather, an unusual watery sort of quality to the light. And looking at these buildings, the thing that strikes me about them is the way that although we have a very cohesive row, each one of them actually has its own unique character. For example, these two here rhyme with the arched features above their windows, which also rhymes with the two arches that we see up here in the middle. But then the gables on the facades either side don't match. This facade here has something of a twinned character to it, with the two gables along the top and twin sets of arches above the windows. But tying it all together, I think, is the red and white stripes in the arches themselves. On the other side of the road, this mock Tudor upper facade could probably do with a lick of paint. And we will be going further up the high road, but for now we'll take a small detour down here to admire these facades. Again, some of them looking perhaps like a bit of upkeep wouldn't go amiss, but the late Victorian building work still very much shines through. And we've got a fantastic view again of the next row that we'll be examining. It's another set of characters, I would say, lots of unique designs, sharing here and there design elements to maintain the cohesion of the row. my eye is particularly drawn to this one on the end. I like the way these three sort of curved string courses are rhyming with the very top of the gable. I also like the Flemish style step gable that we have on the top of this one here. Really a very handsome street. And as we carry on up the hill, we get these much wider facades, where the gable on top spans what might have been the width of two facades in the earlier sets of buildings over here. And we've got some pleasing details with these checkerboard brick designs that we see here, with patterns of flowers. And some very nice little curly ornamentation under the windows there as well. Here now, something of a newer looking building. The ratio of red brick to white plaster leans more heavily in favour of the white plaster in this facade than it did on the older buildings further down the street. And while we're lacking gables on top, we have got this sloped mansard roof with these dormer windows, which is itself quite pleasing. Now, the reason that I haven't explored anywhere in South London yet as part of the Red Brick London series, even though there are lots of areas south of the Thames that boast late 19th century red brick architecture, is that a couple of years ago I made a series which you can find on my first channel called South London is Beautiful, and I actually covered a lot of what we'll see in this episode in a video called Streatham is Beautiful, and I'm going to put a card for that up in the top right hand corner of the screen so you can find that. But we now come to one of my favourite buildings on Streatham High Road. It is now the White Lion, formerly known, I believe, as the Hobgoblin Pub. I love these highly ornamental gables, bristling with spiky outcroppings. And wreathed in what might almost be considered an excessive number of string courses across the facade. This looks like it could be the sunniest coverage there is. Yeah, take a look at that. Resplendent in its sunlit glory. And it's just such pleasingly coloured brick, I find. Turning our attention now to the other side of the road. Strictly not red brick, it's more of a sort of a browny grey brick. We have this very eclectic building with a turreted tower at one end, this one more sort of rounded off, and this one more rectilinear at this end, attached to something that looks like it probably was built in the 1920s or 30s. This part of the facade almost reminds me of Georgian architecture with its regular configuration of windows, but then the colour of the brick and also the sort of Baroque headpiece that we have here is somewhat reminiscent of Dutch architecture, and again we have a sloped mansard roof with dormer windows, hinting at the Parisian style, and a few bits of elaborately curled ironwork on top there. If you know South London, you may be aware that Streatham has a little bit of a reputation for being, shall we say, unsavoury. It's certainly not one of the most dangerous places that you could go to in London, but it's not exactly the safest either. But as we can see from how richly the facades of its high road are decorated, this was once a very affluent area, which has experienced something of a decline in recent decades. But the architecture remains. A local joke about Streatham, used by those who would laughingly like to give it airs and graces, is that it's not pronounced Streatham, but Streatham. I'm really admiring these twin towers on either sides of the streets here. And while there is plenty to look at on this side of the street, the other side does leave a lot to be desired. It's worth mentioning that while the high road is particularly distinguished, many of the side streets are actually worth taking a look at. They're relatively simple designs that were probably all put up fairly quickly within a short space of years. I would guess at the turn of the century, or perhaps in the Edwardian period. But these recurring triangular gables that we see here just create a fantastic effect when viewed in a long row like this, giving the street a marvellous cohesion. And I like the way, on this street in particular, the red brick houses are facing these more sort of yellowish brick buildings, meaning that each side of the street is distinct. Anyway, let's carry on up the high road. We have a building here that reminds me of the eclectic one that we saw further down the street, though this one is perhaps a little bit newer. The curvature of the brickwork around the windows here suggests that this may have come a little bit later. And we have here, I think, our first instance of some pilasters, which is a new word that I learned while editing the previous Red Brick London video. A pilaster is an element on the facade, usually made from plaster stucco, which is made to resemble a column, though rather than being a freestanding structural support, it is just an aesthetic decoration. And we've come so far up the high road that we've actually reached the next train station. This is Streatham Hill. And we start to come to now a very handsome set of red brick facades. Even the balustrades on the balcony and the plasterwork is done in this lovely reddish brown colour. A wonderful mixture here of turrets, I believe there's another one behind that tree, and these wonderful neo-Renaissance style gables. Some darker brickwork here. And I think we can start to get a sense now with these buildings here of how this was indeed at one time a very affluent area. And we'll just take a look now at some of the side streets that we have here. Some really beautiful Edwardian designs. A mixture of red brick, these invitingly curved bay windows, and just a hint of the mock Tudor with the wooden beams that we have here. And not strictly traditional, but I do like the way that this one is painted blue. A really beautiful street, actually. This one looking perhaps somewhat less distinguished. We'll try the next one. Yeah, this one is looking particularly handsome, I would say. More of an uncompromisingly red brick character here. But lots of hints and echoes of some of the facades and gables that we saw on the high road. Very beautiful, the white blossom here. Isn't that stunning? Imagine having that in your home. Living in a house where you get to have that sort of a gable. And a very well kept garden too. A checkerboard design. Yeah, really fantastic. Now, as we've traversed the better part of Streatham High Road, there are a few other little highlights that I want to point out to you. Now, this isn't strictly in Streatham, but really in the area of Brixton Hill. There's just one building here that I want to draw your attention to. I think it's going to be just here. Yes, here it is. A bit of a one-off in this area, but it definitely belongs in the red brick category. Let's see if we can find some sunny coverage. Yep, looking good. Here the sunlight really brings out the shadows and the details in the plaster that we have up here. More pilasters here, though these are a little bit smaller. And the ever-appealing red and white stripes above the windows. Anyway, just a one-off there. I do think that another episode of Red Brick London will take in Brixton, so we'll leave off heading north for now, and we'll head back towards Streatham. There are a couple of other one-offs that I'd like to show you. Here on the edge of Tooting Common, there are some very handsome houses. A nice Dutch gable there. And then this one I've always liked. Red brick on the bottom layer, white on top, and then red tiles on the roof. And a really beautifully coloured stone used for the columns that we see here and around the windows. A very handsome building. And as we rejoin this main road that's sweeping back round to join Streatham High Road, we come to this red brick wonder here. We'll try and find a good view of it on the other side of the hedge. I absolutely love the curly details on each of the gables here, each one a little bit different, but all rhyming across the piece. Let's see if we can find one where the sun is hitting the building, a little bit overexposed. and with the sun in the wrong direction, doesn't look like we're going to find one. Popping back into the map, let's take ourselves up to the northern end of Tooting Common, and we'll take a look at the row facing the park just here. Again, the red and white stripes as a feature shared across all of the facades, along with these rather peculiar details of what looks like it ought to be the space for a rounded window, but no window is present. And now we come to something a bit different and with an even more exaggerated set of red and white striped arches. And we're coming towards the end of our journey through Streatham now. There are just a couple more residential roads that I'd like to take you down. Some really wonderful detailing on the facade here. These beautiful, organic, vine-like designs, and the plaster expertly crafted to imitate hung fabric there. And a really elaborate mock Tudor design there. Unusual to see curled shapes like this, these circles, in anything like a mock Tudor beaming. And these wonderfully wide red brick gables here. Let's just see if there's some coverage without scaffolding. Wow, the scaffolding was there for years. Older, less high fidelity coverage. We might have been better off with the latest. I think we are. Leaving the red brick gables behind, we start to come to some newer Edwardian buildings. These I find particularly pleasing. What a beautiful balcony as well. And some very unusual designs here indeed. Again, we've got the circular shapes in the wooden beaming, and these strange sort of therianthropic dragon designs facing each other here. Most unusual. And we'll take a moment to head down this street here, which has some absolutely wonderful little step gables here and there. So appealing. And I like the way here particularly as well, there's this alternating indented pattern between the white plaster around the window and the red brick. Such a cool looking street. It would not surprise me if some of these houses were on sale for well over £1 million. And here in the wintry coverage without the leaves, we can get a good look at the design of these facades here, looking kind of like a club that you might see in a pack of cards. I'm particularly keen on the balconies that they have in these upper floors here. Now, there's plenty more to see in Streatham. You can spend all day, and I have, exploring its residential side streets. And if you'd like to get a taste of that, and some of its parks like the Rookery at the top of Streatham Common, then do take a look at my Streatham is Beautiful video. So concludes the 5th part of the Red Brick London series. There's plenty more to see, and I've got lots more ideas lined up for you. So leave me a like and subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss the next Red Brick exploration. If you've enjoyed the music that you hear in this video, then take a look at my first channel, which is where I upload all of my original music.